In a towering glass skyscraper where power and influence collide, a man stands alone at the center of a storm no one dares to speak aloud. A storm fueled by silent glances, whispered doubts, and calculated exclusion. Dressed sharply, his every move measured, he fights a battle far beyond spreadsheets and boardroom presentations. A battle where the rules are rigged and the stakes are his very dignity. The corridors echo with quiet contempt, and beneath polished smiles lies a brewing war of survival and justice. But what if the very person they tried to erase from their story was quietly orchestrating the ultimate reckoning? This is a story of resilience, betrayal, and a reveal that turns the tide in ways no one could predict. If this kind of story intrigues you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? And what do you think will happen next? Your voice matters as we unravel this gripping journey together. Malcolm Trenton stands at the head of the long glass-walled conference room, shoulders squared, posture rigid with professional precision, as the projector hums softly behind him. The strategy slides are crisp, filled with bullet points and data charts, painstakingly curated to demonstrate a clear path forward. His voice is even, his diction exact, each sentence honed to anticipate objections before they arise. But the air in the room is dead. The department heads sit lined up on either side of the gleaming table, arms crossed or pens tapping in silent defiance. One of them leans back lazily in his chair, clicking his pen in slow, mocking rhythm, while another tilts her head just slightly, a half smile twisting her lips in unspoken disdain. Their eyes don't follow the laser pointer, tracing the financial projections on the screen. Instead, they flicker to one another, exchanging subtle glances that confirm everything Malcolm can already read in the room. This isn't engagement, it's contempt. He continues regardless, explaining merger synergies and cost-saving measures with unwavering calm, even as a senior manager in an expensive Navy suit raises an eyebrow and snorts quietly enough to make the colleague beside him smirk. The silence grows oppressive. The woman in the red blazer picks up her tablet and pretends to scroll, tapping the screen as if studiously taking notes, but her eyes are glazed and indifferent. At the far end, a young analyst with carefully tousled hair lowers his head to stifle a laugh, shoulders shaking slightly as another man beside him covers his mouth to hide a grin. Malcolm's heart rate spikes. He feels sweat forming under his collar, the fabric clinging to the back of his neck. He forces himself to breathe evenly, to project calm authority, because showing discomfort would be confirming every expectation they hold of him. He knows the unspoken rules here, the constant tightrope he has to walk. So he clicks to the next slide, voice steady, describing an 18% projected ROI over 2 years, a number any reasonable investor would call promising. But the room gives him nothing. No questions, no challenges, just silence thick enough to choke on. He ends with an invitation for discussion, his eyes scanning the room. No one raises a hand. Chairs creak as people lean back in practiced dismissal. The executive at the end of the table closes his notebook with a theatrical sigh, the sound slicing through the silence like a blade. One by one, they stand, straightening their suits, gathering their tablets, and begin filing out with muttered polite excuses that feel like barbed wire. A few share small, conspiratorial smiles that vanish the second they see Malcolm watching them. He holds himself still, spine locked, face expressionless, even as the urge to scream burns at the back of his throat. He packs his laptop with deliberate care, sliding it into his slim leather case, refusing to let his shaking hands show. As he steps out of the room, he catches them in the glass reflection of the corridor, small clusters of bodies leaning in close, whispering behind cupped hands, shoulders shaking with stifled laughter. Someone mimics his posture, waving an imaginary laser pointer, making exaggeratedly solemn faces before dissolving into laughter that they don't even bother to hide once they think he's out of earshot. His stomach turns. He fights the urge to turn on them, to demand they say it to his face. But he knows exactly how that would go. He would be the angry one, the unprofessional one. He keeps walking. The corridor feels miles long. He passes other employees who glance at him with polite confusion, their greetings faltering on their lips as they register the tightness in his jaw, the forced calm in his eyes. He gives curt nods and moves on. His office door closes behind him with a soft, final click. Alone, he finally allows the mask to slip. His shoulders sag. He drops the leather case onto the desk with more force than intended. He sits, elbows on his knees, head hanging low, trying to slow his ragged breathing. The memory of their faces flashes behind his eyelids. The smirks, the rolling eyes, the careful, cold boredom. He feels humiliated, powerless, angry in a way that has nowhere to go. He knows they want him to quit. They want him to see this wall they've built and walk away, confirming every smug assumption they hold about him. He rubs his face with both hands, palms warm and slightly trembling. He wants to believe the quality of his work will save him, that his plan will speak for itself. But deep down, he knows the truth. They won't even hear it. Not from him. Not from someone like him. The company values statement on his wall boasts words like inclusion and respect in tasteful embossed lettering. He stares at it until the words blur. They are as empty as the polite smiles that vanish the second his back is turned. He forces himself to straighten up, wipes at his eyes roughly with the back of his hand, and powers on his computer. He opens the same slide deck they just ignored and starts making revisions. He knows it won't change anything, but he does it anyway. The slide deck is still open. The numbers haven't changed, the projection's still solid. But he knows they won't matter to people who refuse to see him as credible. His fingers hover over the keyboard. He wants to rewrite every bullet point, rephrase every sentence, as if somehow the problem was the font or the phrasing instead of the color of his skin. Instead, he shuts the laptop firmly, the sound sharp in the quiet office. He leans back, feeling the tension in his spine coil tighter. Outside the glass walls, the office hums with motion. He sees groups moving between cubicles, conversations flowing in low murmurs punctuated by polite laughter. No one looks in his direction. If they see him at all, they don't acknowledge it. It's not quite hostility, it's a studied, weaponized indifference that lands like a slap every time. Malcolm forces himself to stand, squaring his shoulders, and steps out into that river of motion with the careful poise of a man trying not to let the current pull him under. He moves down the hallway toward the break room, passing an assistant who pretends not to see him until the last second, mumbling a hasty morning without meeting his eyes. The words are rushed, perfunctory, and clearly meant to end the interaction before it begins. He nods stiffly and keeps walking. As he approaches the glass-walled cafeteria, the noise inside seems to amplify, the hum of conversation and clatter of utensils over cheap plates filling his ears before he even pushes the door open. He steps inside and immediately feels the shift. A table of senior managers at the center of the room grows silent at his approach. It isn't the hush of respect, it's the defensive, conspiratorial silence of people who've been talking about him. One of them slowly sets down her coffee cup, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. Another clicks his pen twice before folding his arms across his chest. Malcolm gives them a polite nod, his face a carefully arranged mask. He hesitates for half a beat, considering taking the last empty seat at the table, but the stiffness in their bodies makes it clear it's not an invitation. One man stares directly at him with a flat, challenging expression, jaw tight, daring him to sit anyway. The moment stretches, brittle as glass, before Malcolm turns away. He moves to the counter and pours himself coffee with deliberate care, the burn of humiliation lighting up the back of his neck. He can hear the conversation restart behind him, softer now, with an occasional bark of laughter that stops and starts unnaturally. They don't want him hearing the punchlines. He stirs his coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream disappear into the black. He doesn't bother sweetening it. He moves to the far corner, where a small two-seat table sits empty. He sets down his cup, pulling out his phone and opening his calendar just to have something to stare at. He forces a slow breath in and out, counting to 5, telling himself he's imagining things even though he knows he's not. Over at the main table, a manager leans over and whispers something, and the others laugh again, this time unable to suppress it fully. Malcolm hears the scrape of a chair and someone rises to leave, casting him a final look that is equal parts smug and dismissive. He doesn't react. He refuses to give them the satisfaction. But the coffee is bitter in his mouth. He finishes it in a few burning gulps and stands abruptly, ignoring the few glances that follow him as he sets his cup carefully in the bin and leaves the cafeteria without looking back. The hallway feels even longer on the return. He walks quickly, head high, but his thoughts spiral with every step. He remembers the way their conversation died when he entered, the small, gleeful way it resumed once he turned away. He tells himself it's nothing, that he's imagining it, but he can't lie to himself like that. He's seen the same dance in 100 rooms before. He steps into the elevator lobby just as the doors begin to close on the first car. A group of managers and senior analysts are inside. He recognizes all of them from the meeting that morning. He quickens his pace, hand reaching out, but no one moves to hold the door. He locks eyes with one manager for a half-second, seeing the calm, satisfied disinterest in his gaze before the doors shut silently between them. He stands there, breathing heavily, listening to the motor hum as the elevator ascends. He notices his hand is still outstretched and lets it fall to his side, curling it into a fist that he shoves in his pocket. Behind him, another employee steps up to wait for the next car. Their eyes flick over him and then away, studying the floor numbers, pretending he doesn't exist. The next elevator arrives empty. He steps inside alone, staring at his own reflection in the brushed steel walls. His eyes look tired. He smooths his tie one more time, as if it's the only thing he can control. The doors close, and he exhales slowly, the breath shaking. When they open again, he steps out onto the executive floor, where the hush is deeper, the carpet thicker, the hostility more polite, but no less suffocating. He moves down the hallway, the soft thump of his shoes nearly the only sound. As he passes office doors, he sees small groups gathered inside, heads bent close, the edges of laughter ghosting through the cracked openings. But as he draws near, the laughter dies. Voices drop. They look busy. He keeps walking, back straight, steps even. He knows exactly how this game is played. He arrives back at his own door, pausing with his hand on the knob. He inhales, composing himself, drawing that brittle armor of calm professionalism back around his shoulders. He steps inside, closing it softly behind him, shutting out the office and all its quiet, insidious cruelty. He returns to his chair, feeling the stiffness in his back, the tremor in his hand as he pulls his laptop closer. He opens the slide deck, blinking at the words that feel like they belong to someone else now. He deletes a sentence. He reviews his notes for the big meeting planned for the afternoon, eyes scanning for any last-minute improvements, fingers poised on the keyboard to perfect every sentence. His strategy document is his armor, his proof that no matter how they dismiss him, he is prepared and unassailable. He saves the final version carefully, double-checking charts and bullet points, verifying that every number is sourced and defensible. He attaches it to an email, sending it to the department's administrative assistant with precise instructions to print copies for everyone attending the meeting. He even CCs the senior managers, so there's no confusion. He leans back for a moment, eyes closing, exhaling through his nose to calm the tightness in his chest. This time, he tells himself, they will have to see the work for what it is. The plan is too solid to dismiss. As the office fills with the usual buzz and motion, he maintains a careful, professional composure. He nods to people who avert their eyes, offers polite greetings that return as curt murmurs or distracted waves. When the meeting time arrives, he gathers his tablet and pen, adjusts his tie one last time in the reflection of a glass wall, and walks with measured confidence toward the main conference room. Inside, the atmosphere is as frigid as before. Managers take their seats with deliberate slowness, trading quiet remarks that hush just as he enters. He moves to the head of the table, standing tall, projecting calm control. The administrative assistant enters moments later, distributing printed copies of his strategy document to each attendee. Malcolm thanks her softly, nodding once before returning his focus to the room. He waits for them to start reading. Almost immediately, he sees the first confused frown. Pages turn too quickly, eyes flicking with irritation. Someone clears his throat pointedly. A woman with tortoiseshell glasses leans back in her chair, tapping the packet against the table with restrained aggression. The man to her left snorts once, low and incredulous, shaking his head. Malcolm feels the first warning bell of dread. He quickly flips through his own copy and freezes. The charts are wrong. Entire sections of text are mangled, bullet points reordered nonsensically, headers misspelled in ways that would humiliate a first-year intern. A section he'd carefully crafted to show synergy between divisions is duplicated 3 times with different numbers. Some pages are blank except for a single, misplaced paragraph. His heart hammers in his ribs. He feels sweat bead at his hairline. He looks up and meets the cold, amused stare of the man across from him, who is barely hiding a smirk. Around the table, quiet laughter builds in the form of sniffs and coughs. Someone murmurs that this is amateur hour. The sound slices through Malcolm's composure like a razor. He clears his throat, voice shaking slightly, and tries to explain there's been a formatting error, that this isn't the document he submitted. But they're already talking over him. A woman in a sharp navy suit raises an eyebrow and says she can't make sense of any of it, as she shoves the packet away dismissively. Another man closes his copy with deliberate force and folds his arms across his chest, staring at Malcolm like he's trash left on the sidewalk. Someone else leans sideways to whisper into their neighbor's ear, both shoulders shaking in silent laughter. The humiliation crawls up Malcolm's spine and nests at the base of his skull, making his vision pulse at the edges. He tries to steady his voice, to say he can email them the correct version immediately, but no one is listening. Chairs scrape as people lean away from the table or twist toward side conversations that exclude him completely. The meeting has become a free-for-all. No one is even pretending to discuss strategy anymore. They're tearing apart the document in hushed, gleeful tones while he stands there like a statue, forced to endure it. He catches the assistant who handed out the packets glancing at him in horror, mouthing a silent apology before backing out of the room. The door closes with a quiet click that sounds like a guillotine blade. After the meeting dissolves in muttered insults and pointedly slammed folders, Malcolm packs up the ruined copies with shaking hands. He can't even look at them. The typos leer back at him like insults, a testament to his failure to control even this one thing. He leaves the conference room last, forcing himself to walk slowly so they won't see him flee. As he turns down the hallway, head down, he notices a nearby glass-walled meeting room, where 3 of the department managers are already huddled around a table. They see him watching. They don't stop. They don't hide it. One of them gestures toward the ruined packet he's still clutching, laughter erupting even though the door is closed. The man in the navy suit pretends to read aloud from it with exaggerated, mocking confusion, while the others wipe tears from their eyes. Malcolm freezes for half a second, fingers clenching around the mangled paper until it crumples. His mouth opens, then closes. There's nothing he can say. He forces himself to turn away. He can feel their eyes on him even as he walks, feel their laughter following like a stink he can't wash off. He makes it to his office and closes the door, leaning against it heavily for a moment before pushing off and throwing the packets into the trash with shaking hands. He sits at his desk, burying his face in his palms. He tries to tell himself it was an accident. But he knows. He knows someone edited it deliberately, introducing errors, so bad no one could take him seriously. They had to go into his shared files, had to save the sabotage under his name, and no one would admit it. No one would face consequences. He's the one who looks incompetent now. He can't prove a thing, and they know it. They're counting on his silence, on the knowledge that if he protests too loudly, they'll label him aggressive, unstable. He deletes the entire document in one savage motion and immediately regrets it. But it's done. There is no undoing the shame of yesterday. He forces himself to stand, smoothing the front of his suit reflexively, as if tidiness can save him, can somehow hide the raw edges of humiliation clinging to him like a second skin. He leaves his office, walking with stiff determination down the hall. His gaze stays forward, focused on some imagined horizon beyond the polished marble floors and the carefully curated wall art that boasts of diversity, inclusion, teamwork. Words that feel like lies. He forces himself to walk into the open common space where staff have gathered to admire the freshly mounted poster for the upcoming leadership retreat. It's large, printed in company colors, glossy enough to reflect the overhead lights like a promise of prestige. Faces beam from the design, the photos carefully arranged in symmetrical lines, each one accompanied by name and title. But his face isn't there. His name is absent. Malcolm stops, breath catching painfully in his throat, heart sinking in a dull, nauseating drop. He feels the heat rising to his face as he scans the poster over and over, desperately looking for some sign that it's just an oversight, a typo, some trivial mistake. But there's nothing. His absence is deliberate, final. Around him, conversation dips, small talk shifting into nervous energy as a few employees cast him sidelong glances. He can almost hear the questions they're not asking. He forces his shoulders straighter, expression locked into an unreadable mask. He doesn't say a word. A junior manager sidles up next to the poster, pretending to admire it, catching Malcolm's eye for a fraction of a second before looking away with a tight, forced smile that doesn't reach his eyes. The tension in the air grows thicker, suffocating. Malcolm turns on his heel and walks away before anyone can see the betrayal in his expression. He returns to his office, closing the door quietly so it doesn't draw attention. He leans his back against it, eyes closed, fighting the wave of nausea that threatens to rise. He breathes deeply, trying to calm the tremor in his hands. He is still their superior, at least on paper. He reminds himself of that like a mantra, though the words feel empty. He moves to his desk and sits heavily, pulling his phone from his pocket with the same grim focus he uses to dissect market data. He opens the company chat app, scrolling through the threads with practiced efficiency until he finds it. The private group chat for leadership humor is unlocked on the shared server. He shouldn't be able to see it at all, but someone forgot to restrict access, or wanted him to see. The first message is an innocuous joke about coffee. Then someone posts a photo. It's him, mid-sentence during his presentation, mouth open, eyes half-lidded in an unflattering angle someone had clearly chosen on purpose. Beneath it, the caption reads, "Guess they really will let anyone in leadership now. Thanks, DI." Another message pops up beneath it. He looks so confused. Poor diversity hire lost on stage. A string of laughing emojis trails behind. Malcolm scrolls further, stomach churning, as he sees variations on the meme posted again and again with different captions. When your quota speaks strategy. Next time try hooked on phonics before the meeting, Malcolm. Someone adds an edited image of him with clown makeup. He can practically hear their snickers echoing in his head. His vision swims. He grips the phone so tightly it creaks in his hand. He wants to smash it against the wall, but instead, he places it carefully on his desk, fingers trembling as they let go. He sits back, chest heaving as he forces air in and out, eyes locked on nothing, trying to hold himself together. Outside his office window, the floor continues in its polite rhythm. Employees wander by chatting casually. Someone laughs at something on their screen. The world moves on, untouched by the absolute wreckage of his dignity. He thinks about getting up, about confronting them, about sending a scathing reply, but the thought is crushed instantly by the reality of who he is here. The lone black executive, the one they already see as aggressive, unstable, unfit. They want that reaction. They're daring him to break. He can see them rehearsing the apology in their heads already. "We didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke. You're too sensitive." He refuses to give them that satisfaction. So he sits there, the laughter from the chat echoing in the quiet of his office, the mockery burning behind his eyes like acid. The poster is still up outside. His absence is still glaring. No one will change it. No one will even mention it. He feels like he's choking on the air itself. His hands shake once before he shoves them into his lap, forcing them to stillness. He forces his breathing back into even, controlled rhythm, pulling every shred of professionalism around him like armor that doesn't quite fit anymore. He picks up his pen, sets it down, opens his email, stares at the blinking cursor in a blank reply window. He is so tired, but he knows what happens if he stops, if he quits, if he lets them see him break. So he types carefully, formally, ignoring the burn of unshed tears in his eyes, sending a request to the marketing department for an updated poster with correct leadership information. Words so bloodless, they make him want to scream. He hits send. He straightens his tie. He wipes his eyes carefully with a handkerchief so he doesn't ruin his image. He's just about to dive in when his inbox dings. The subject line reads New Strategic Initiative, flagged as urgent from the division head. He opens it with a reflexive obedience born of years of having to be twice as ready, twice as fast. But the content hits him like a brick. He's been assigned a failing, under-resourced legacy project. The one everyone knows has bled red ink for years and chewed up 3 managers before him. The language is diplomatic, praising his unique ability to think outside the box, while suggesting he owned this challenge with full autonomy. He knows the game immediately. They're setting him up to fail, to give themselves a reason that sounds objective, professional. He tries to steady his breathing. He reads the message 3 times, each word more insulting than the last. He sends back an acceptance email without a single protest, because he knows if he refuses, they'll call him uncooperative, not a team player, proof he's not ready for real leadership. He closes the email and buries his head in his hands for a moment, letting the dread roll over him. When he lifts it again, he forces his back straight, pulls the files they've dumped on him toward himself, and begins reading through a landscape of missing budgets, outdated supplier lists, and half-complete specs. It's a mess designed to be, but he spends a day in grim silence, pushing through it, refusing to give them the meltdown they want. When his team shows up for a kickoff meeting he's scheduled, they arrive late, muttering apologies that drip with sarcasm. They sprawl in chairs, eyes glazed, phones out under the table. He keeps his voice even as he explains the new plan, the timelines he's drafted, the clear, actionable steps. One of them raises an eyebrow and says ambitious, in a tone that makes the other snicker. Another crosses her arms, leaning back like she's watching a bad movie. They ask no questions, offer no ideas. They just wait for him to finish talking so they can leave. When he assigns action items, one manager stares blankly and says, "Yeah, sure, we'll get to it," scribbling something illegible before immediately returning to his phone. He dismisses them without anger, face locked in that carefully blank professionalism he spent a lifetime perfecting. But when the door closes, his fingers curl into fists on the table. He knows they won't lift a finger on this. He knows the failure is already guaranteed. Later in the week, he attends the leadership meeting where division heads present progress reports. He sits near the end of the table, project folder in hand, notes ready, his stomach tight with dread. When his turn arrives, he begins presenting with calm authority despite everything. He clicks to his first slide, carefully explaining the restructuring plan he's drafted to salvage the project. He's 3 sentences in when the screen abruptly switches to the next presenter's slide deck. For a second, he thinks it's a glitch, blinking in confusion, but the next division head begins speaking immediately without even glancing his way. The meeting host at the far end doesn't say a word, just leans back, listening attentively to the new presentation. Malcolm tries to raise his voice to clarify he wasn't finished, but no one even looks at him. The room just moves on. He sits frozen, folder still open, pointer in hand, voice dying in his throat. He feels a humiliating heat crawl up his face, pricking behind his eyes as he swallows it back. He closes the folder slowly, setting it carefully on the table as if the small motion can somehow anchor him, keep him from shaking. The presenter at the front smiles as he explains their plan, throwing in a self-deprecating joke that gets the room laughing. Malcolm's gaze drops to the notes in front of him, reading the words without seeing them, hearing the laughter like white noise pounding in his head. He forces himself to remain perfectly still. He knows if he gets up and leaves, they'll say he's emotional, unprofessional. He knows if he interrupts, they'll call him disruptive. He sits there like a statue while the meeting rolls on without him, pretending he's invisible. At the end, when the room empties, he waits until he's alone before gathering his things. He leaves the conference room slowly, ears ringing with phantom laughter, footsteps echoing in the empty hall. He turns toward his office, head down. As he passes a cluster of glass-walled huddle rooms, he sees the same managers who snickered in the cafeteria now gathered inside. One of them spots him and leans in to whisper something. Another mimes clicking through slides with exaggerated slowness, while mouthing words in an open, dumbfounded expression. They all laugh, watching him through the glass. He doesn't stop. He doesn't let them see his face. He just keeps walking, the humiliation crawling under his skin like fire ants. He reaches his office and closes the door carefully behind him, sinking into his chair with a slow exhale that shudders despite his best effort. He looks at the abandoned project notes, the crumpled meeting agenda, the red marks of their sabotage like wounds across the pages. He knows they want him to quit. He knows they're building the file that will justify pushing him out for performance issues. He stares at the project timeline pinned to his wall, red lines and overdue milestones scarring the neat grid, every mark a silent accusation that somehow rests on him alone. He wants to pull it down, shred it, throw it in the trash. Instead, he straightens it with trembling fingers, making sure it's perfectly level, the way he has always been forced to keep himself perfectly controlled. He is in the middle of revising the latest progress update for the division head, a document he knows no one will read except to find errors to throw back in his face. When the calendar alert pings, he glances at it, eyes narrowing. It's strategy session for his department, flagged urgent, with every name on his team listed except his. His heart drops. He double-checks the invite, scrolling the list slowly, forcing himself to read every letter so there can be no mistake. His name isn't there. He's the department lead. It's his job to oversee these discussions, to sign off on the final plans. He grips the edge of his desk until his knuckles whiten, jaw clenched so tightly it hurts. He can almost hear them in that conference room already. His staff seated comfortably while someone else presides, pretending he doesn't exist. He forces himself to breathe, slow and even. Getting up and storming in there would be exactly what they want. He can see it playing out in their heads. Malcolm Trenton, angry, aggressive, proving them right. He feels caged. Instead, he releases the edge of the desk and sits back, fingers drumming against the armrest in a furious, silent rhythm. He tries to refocus on his draft, but the words blur and scatter on the screen. He can't pretend he isn't aware of the low murmur of voices outside his office, the way they ebb and swell with laughter, growing sharper as the meeting clearly hits some triumphant note. He knows they're discussing assignments he's supposed to approve, cutting him out like a tumor. Eventually, the voices fade, chairs scrape, footsteps disperse. He waits another 10 minutes before opening his door, stepping out with practiced calm. The open office buzzes with polite activity, no sign of the conspiratorial huddle that was there only moments ago. He nods to a junior manager who won't meet his eye, face flushing as she busies herself with a stack of folders. He returns to his office slowly, closing the door with care. He's still expected to submit his own strategy recommendations at the end of the week, even though the plan has already been finalized without him. The implication is clear. He can either rubber stamp it or be labeled uncooperative. He slumps back in his chair for a second, hand pressed to his mouth to stifle any sound, because if he starts yelling now, he won't be able to stop. Later that day, he joins another cross-departmental meeting, determined to salvage something, anything. He arrives early, sets up his notes, even makes sure the projector is tested. When the others arrive, they greet each other warmly, swapping stories and jokes, careful to keep the mood light. No one speaks to him except for a stiff nod from a director he's known for years. When the meeting starts, he forces himself to listen politely as others run through their slides, pointing out minor errors, suggesting tweaks, keeping his voice even and professional. But when it's finally his turn, the room changes. He stands to speak, notes in hand, explaining a straightforward improvement to cut costs while improving delivery timelines. But he doesn't even finish the first point before he feels it happen. The slow recline of chairs around the table, arms folding across chests, eyes glazing over theatrically. Someone lets out an exaggerated yawn. A director tips back so far in his chair it squeaks, drawing a few muffled snickers. Another manager leans over to whisper to his neighbor, both of them exchanging long-suffering eye rolls, as if this is the price they pay for being here. Malcolm tries to push forward, voice rising just a hair, desperate to be heard. But the energy is gone. They're telegraphing it clearly. Your ideas don't matter. We won't even pretend to listen. He feels the words falter in his throat. He flips the page in his notes with trembling fingers, his face hot, ears ringing. The project manager at the other end of the table clears his throat pointedly and starts organizing his own papers, signaling the meeting is over whether Malcolm is done or not. People start rising, scraping chairs, ignoring him as they start side conversations about lunch plans and weekend trips. No one says thank you. No one acknowledges he was even speaking. He stands there for a moment, motionless, hand frozen mid-gesture, staring at them as they file out, laughter and chatter echoing in the now cavernous room. When the door closes, he drops his arm and exhales shakily. He feels stripped bare, exposed. His ideas dead on arrival, because they came from his mouth. He cleans up slowly, carefully, stacking his notes so precisely it hurts. He turns off the projector, the room darkening by degrees until only the pale winter light filters in through the blinds. As he walks back to his office, head low, he sees the same small groups gathered around desks and corners, heads bent together. They're still talking strategy, still making decisions he's supposed to approve, but they don't even lower their voices when he passes. A senior analyst glances up, meets his eyes for a split second, then looks back down at her screen like he's invisible. He steps into his office and shuts the door gently behind him, pressing his forehead to the cool wood for a moment before pushing off and turning to face the empty room. He moves to his chair and sinks into it heavily, the cushion hissing quietly as it takes his weight. He rubs his temples, willing the building pressure in his skull to ease. But it doesn't. It pulses there, angry and tight, a constant reminder of everything he can't say. He opens his inbox to see a summary email already circulating about the strategy session he wasn't invited to. Malcolm Trenton's mornings usually began with the muted buzz of a city awakening beneath the glass windows of his high-rise office, the sky a fading indigo turning slowly toward dawn. But today was different. There was a subtle shift in the air, something beneath the surface that even his practiced senses couldn't immediately place. He dressed as always, a charcoal suit perfectly tailored, a crisp white shirt beneath, and a deep navy tie knotted just so. His reflection in the mirror showed the calm, measured confidence he'd mastered over years of battles. Battles no one outside these walls understood. He left his office earlier than usual, the weight of the last months pressing on him like a hidden gravity. His steps echoed softly down the marble corridor as he descended toward the lobby, head bowed in thought, but heart pounding beneath his chest. The security guard greeted him with a nod, the usual routine unfolding without surprise or fanfare. But as Malcolm stepped into the vast lobby, his eyes immediately caught the gleam of something new, a brass plaque freshly mounted on the polished stone wall near the main entrance. Drawn forward, he stopped and read the names inscribed, an official list of the company's principal shareholders, the true power holders behind the facade of management. And there, at the very top of the list in bold engraved letters, was his name, Malcolm Trenton. He stepped back instinctively, the plaque reflecting the soft lobby lights, casting his name in a golden glow. Around him, employees paused mid-step, faces turning toward the plaque, whispering in low voices. The expression on their faces shifted from casual business to something more guarded. Curiosity mingled with disbelief and unease. A young woman in a crisp blouse looked at him, then to the plaque, her brows furrowing in confusion. Two men in suits exchanged uneasy glances, mouths tight. The news spread like wildfire, carried on hushed conversations and stolen glances. Malcolm felt their eyes on him, the quiet shock rolling through the crowd like a wave. He did not speak, did not smile. He simply stood there, allowing the moment to settle like dust in the air. Later that morning, a crisis meeting was hastily convened in one of the glass-walled boardrooms. The old guard, those who had spent months undermining him, sat rigidly around the table, faces pale, tension crackling like electricity in the air. The chair at the head of the table was empty, but it was clear who the meeting was about. The door creaked open, and an assistant entered late, clutching a heavy binder thick with legal documents. She set it carefully on the polished table, the weight of it matching the gravity in the room. As the binder was opened, the cover page was visible to all. Ownership transfer agreement. Malcolm Trenton, sole owner. Official seals gleamed under the bright lights. Signatures signed and notarized. The room fell into a stunned silence, so complete it seemed to suck the air from their lungs. One of the senior managers swallowed audibly, eyes fixed on the binder as if it were a poison. Another shifted in his seat, fists clenched, jaw tightening visibly. The CEO who had once dismissed Malcolm with barely concealed disdain was nowhere to be seen, his absence screaming louder than any words could. The assistant glanced nervously around the room, then quietly closed the binder and backed out without a word. The silence stretched out before breaking in a flurry of whispered questions and frantic murmurs as the reality settled over them. Malcolm had quietly, meticulously acquired majority ownership, buying out shareholders with a combination of legal savvy and capital he had kept hidden, waiting for the right moment to assert control. It was not a grand announcement. No speeches, no public declaration, just a quiet, undeniable shift of power, slipping beneath their radar until it was too late. As the meeting dissolved into chaos and whispers, Malcolm returned to his office with an uncharacteristic sense of calm. His shoulders were heavier with responsibility, but lighter with vindication. His expression was unreadable, a mask forged through years of having to hide his pain behind stoic resolve. But beneath that exterior lay a storm of justice finally set into motion. Behind him, a team of legal professionals moved like shadows, carrying folders and envelopes thick with official seals and termination notices, prepared to clean house with surgical precision. The atmosphere in the office was thick with tension, an invisible electric charge that sent whispers fluttering between cubicles, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Word had spread quickly that Malcolm's quiet coup was complete, and with it came a wave of fear among those who had spent months undermining him. They scrambled frantically to erase the digital evidence of their cruelty, hastily deleting chat messages, memes, and emails from the internal servers in a desperate attempt to cover their tracks. But Malcolm had anticipated this reaction. The company's new compliance system, one he had helped design under the radar, was ruthless. Every alteration, deletion, and edit was logged immutably, like a digital fingerprint that no one could wipe clean. Legal teams pored over the audit trails with cold efficiency, attaching the damning evidence directly to termination files. The faces of those who had mocked him, ridiculed his strategy, and spread vicious memes were now painted in harsh, undeniable light. Malcolm's steps carried him past familiar offices where whispers stopped abruptly, heads ducked behind monitors, and phones were silenced. His presence was a silent command. The era of disregard was over. Doors he once could not open now held themselves ajar for him, and the staff that once ignored his greetings now watched him with wary eyes. He walked with no need to explain, no desire to gloat, only the steady certainty of justice unfolding. At his side, the legal team moved quietly but purposefully, handing out envelopes of termination letters, collecting security badges with practiced attachment, and escorting those who once scorned him to the exit. There was no shouting, no scenes, only the slow, deliberate dismantling of a toxic regime that had thrived on exclusion and cruelty. As Malcolm passed by the glass-walled meeting rooms, he caught sight of a group huddled together, their faces pale, their bodies tense with panic. They avoided his gaze, hands shaking as they clutched their belongings, the weight of their downfall sinking in. One of them made a subtle, futile attempt to offer a forced smile, but it faltered and vanished under the heavy silence. In the elevators, the atmosphere was charged but respectful. Colleagues who had once turned their backs now offered nods of acknowledgement. The building itself seemed to shift in tone, as if welcoming the new order. Malcolm did not celebrate. There was no triumph in the destruction of others, only a solemn understanding that justice, long delayed, was finally being served. He returned to his office, the quiet click of the door closing behind him a sharp contrast to the chaos that had erupted in the halls. He sat down at his desk, the weight of responsibility heavier than ever, but tempered by the knowledge that the company was now on a path toward healing and renewal. Outside his window, the city stretched endlessly, lights flickering like stars in the dusk. He breathed deeply, letting the moment settle. As the CEO and principal shareholder, Malcolm's name was now synonymous with strategic brilliance and resilience. The business world, once indifferent or outright hostile, now studied his moves with a mix of respect and fascination. Yet the praise came with an unspoken reckoning for the company's former leadership. Reports and investigative pieces began peeling back the layers of toxic culture that had been ignored, denied, or concealed for years. Screenshots of internal chat logs leaked, snippets of messages dripping with casual racism and blatant disrespect, particularly targeting Malcolm and other minority employees. The internet quickly became a tribunal, with former executives' reputations unraveling before the court of public opinion. Job offers evaporated as background checks uncovered the unsavory details, recruiters withdrawing their interest in candidates whose names once carried weight. Malcolm was acutely aware of this fallout. It was inevitable and necessary for the company's rebirth. But it also weighed on him personally. The knowledge that the pain he had endured was now a stain that would follow others for years to come. He spent mornings meeting with HR and legal teams, overseeing new initiatives designed to rebuild trust and implement genuine inclusivity. Policies for diversity training were revamped, external audits commissioned, and anonymous reporting channels established to root out ongoing discrimination. Yet the path forward was neither quick nor easy. In the hallways, Malcolm noticed the subtle shifts. People who once averted their eyes now exchanged tentative greetings. The atmosphere buzzed with a cautious optimism, but also an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty among those left standing. The company was reeling from the public revelations, grappling with lost clients and a shaken workforce. At the same time, Malcolm fielded calls from investors eager to understand the new leadership vision, reporters hungry for exclusive interviews, and industry peers seeking partnerships under his stewardship. He balanced the demands with precision, never losing sight of the goal: transformation that transcended surface-level change. Meanwhile, the ousted executives found themselves adrift. Malcolm kept an ear to the ground, informed through discreet channels about their struggles to regain footing. Some tried to spin stories of victimhood, blaming political correctness or claiming their reputations were unfairly damaged. But the evidence was undeniable. Background checks routinely flagged the racist and disparaging comments they'd made in what they had assumed were private conversations. No matter how much they polished their resumes or rehearsed apologies, the digital footprint of their bigotry haunted them relentlessly. Malcolm recognized the bitter irony. Their own words, once weapons against him, had become their shackles. In late afternoon meetings with his top advisors, Malcolm focused on long-term strategies, aware that healing a fractured company required both discipline and empathy. He insisted on transparency, pushing for open forums where employees could voice grievances and share ideas without fear. The old guard's fall had sent shockwaves through the culture, but it was only the beginning of the hard work to rebuild trust. One evening, Malcolm found himself alone in the conference room, the city lights casting a constellation of reflections on the glass. He thought about the journey from that first hostile meeting, where he had been greeted with silence and ridicule, to this moment, where his leadership was both tested and celebrated on a scale he had scarcely imagined. Despite the victories, a heavy weight pressed on his chest. The scars of exclusion and mockery were etched deep. Yet he understood that his role was not just to lead a company, but to embody a new standard of leadership, one that demanded accountability, courage, and unwavering integrity. Yet, amid the endless strategy sessions and policy reviews, this moment was one he treasured. Reviewing applications from candidates selected through the company's newly established Equitable Hiring Initiative. Each resume and cover letter represented more than just potential talent. It symbolized hope for a future where opportunity was genuinely accessible regardless of background. As he flipped through the digital files, Malcolm saw names and stories that resonated with the diversity and resilience he had fought so hard to champion. There were candidates from underrepresented communities, women breaking glass ceilings, and individuals whose perseverance had overcome systemic barriers. He read carefully, not just scanning credentials, but imagining the voices behind the words, the passion, and the drive waiting to be unleashed. With each thoughtful review, he placed a digital stamp of approval, a quiet affirmation of commitment to a fairer, more inclusive future. There was no fanfare, no announcement, only the steady, unyielding belief that true change began with these small but deliberate decisions. Outside the window, the city pulsed with life, the setting sun painting the skyscrapers in hues of orange and purple. The noise of the bustling streets below was distant but constant, a reminder of the world beyond these walls, a world Malcolm sought to reshape in his own quiet way. He stood and walked toward the expansive glass doors leading to the balcony. The cool evening air greeted him, brushing against his face like a promise. He leaned on the railing and gazed out at the city lights flickering to life, each window a story, each street a vein of possibility. In that vast panorama, he saw not just buildings but dreams, dreams deferred and dreams awakened. The weight of the past months, the betrayals, the mockery, the battles, felt distant now, transformed into the foundation for something stronger. Behind him, the CEO chair sat empty, the door to his office left slightly ajar. It was an unspoken invitation, a symbol of leadership that was not about power, but about stewardship. Malcolm knew that leadership was not a throne to cling to, but a mantle to pass on when the time was right. He thought of the many who had doubted him, who had tried to diminish his worth. Their downfall was not his triumph, but a collective reckoning. His vision was broader, encompassing a company reborn through justice, empathy, and true equality. He understood the challenges ahead would be daunting. Old habits die hard, and the scars left by years of discrimination would not fade overnight. But the seed had been planted. Change was no longer a whisper, but a chorus growing louder every day. Malcolm inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs, steadying his mind for the journey still to come. He did not fear the future, he embraced it. With one last glance at the glittering cityscape, he stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind him, but leaving it open enough to remind himself and others that leadership was a shared responsibility. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more gripping narratives that dive deep into justice, resilience, and transformation. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about Malcolm's journey? Did any part of the plot resonate with you or surprise you? Also, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your feedback means a lot and helps shape future stories.